Hello, everyone. My name is Aviana Calderon, and today I will be sharing my curriculum analysis presentation, Comparing and Scaling, Ratios and Proportions Curriculum Analysis. The Connected Math Project. What is it? Connected Math Project also known as CMP, is a mathematics curriculum designed for middle grade students in 6th through 8th grade. The primary objective of CMP is to assist both students and teachers in gaining mathematical knowledge, comprehension, skills, while also fostering an awareness and appreciation for the interconnectedness of various mathematical concepts and the links between mathematics and other fields. It is also published by Pearson Education. Sixth grade ratio and proportions standards. So we start with 6.MP, which states display perseverance and patience in problem solving, demonstrate skills and strategies needed to succeed in mathematics, including critical thinking, reasoning, and effective collaboration and expression. Seek help and apply feedback. Also, set and monitor goals. Our ratio and proportion standard is 6.NR4. Solve a variety of contextual problems, including ratios, unit rate, equivalent rate ratios, percentages, and conversions within measurement systems using proportional reasoning. Also, this standard is broken down into 7 other standards that are geared more towards specific learning goals. For example, we have 6.NR 4.2, make tables of equivalent ratios relating quantities with whole number measurements, find missing values in the tables, and plot the pairs of values on the coordinate plane. Use tables to compare ratios. Our 7th grade ratio and proportion standards are as follows. Our mathematical practice standard is the exact same as 6th grade. However, our broad standards is 7.PAR4, recognize proportional relationships and relevant mathematical problems, represent, solve, and explain these relationships with tables, graphs, and equations. And then we have more specific standards down below. And this standard is actually broken up into 12 individual standards. We go from 7.PAR 4.1 all the way until 7.PAR 4.12. Also within this standard, since we have new Georgia mathematical standards, they have added some statistical standards to this unit as well. And that is where the 7.PAR 4.10 through 7.PAR 4.12 come in. Those are actually statistic standards that have been embedded into the ratio and proportion standards due to their common nature. For example, 7.PAR 4.12 states use data from repeated random samples to evaluate how much a sample mean is expected to vary from a population mean. Simulate multiple samples of the same size. Our standards of mathematical practice that relate both to 6th grade and 7th grade, according to our textbook, are as follows. 6th grade relates to mathematical standards 1, 2, 4, 6, and 7. For example, it relates to mathematical standards practice 4 in the sense that students model real life situations using symbols, and it also relates to mathematical practice 7, which students make connections between rates and shows the relationship between quantities. In grade 7, the mathematical standards are related to 1, 3, 4, and 6. For example, students solve multi-step ratio problems involving percents. That would be your discount, sales tax, and gratuity. And it also relates to mathematical standards practice 4, which says students represent proportional relationships as tables, graphs, and equations. Our 7th grade horizontal planning is as follows. So our ratios and proportions standards for 7th grade relate to computer science, ELA, and science. In computer science, it relates 2, ratios and proportions, from analyzing various ways to visually represent data. And it also discusses design decisions and choosing between text, tables, graphs, and charts. And ELA, that is related to ratios and proportions, as it introduced a topic clearly, previewing what is to follow, organize ideas, concepts, and information using strategies such as definition, classification, comparison, contrast, and cause and effect, including formatting, graphics, for example, charts and tables, and multimedia when useful to aid comprehension. The science content relates to ratios and proportions as it obtains, evaluates, and communicates information to describe how cell structures, cells, tissues, organs, and organ systems interact to maintain the basic needs of organisms. So it relates to science in a way how tables, graphs, and equations, they're all related into one, and so are these topics here that are related to science. We have our social studies, fine arts, and CTAE horizontal planning as well. So social studies is related to ratios and proportions, as it understands that a basic principle of effective personal money management is to live within one's income. It relates to fine arts, health, physical education, and world languages. As physical education, the physically educated student demonstrates knowledge and skills to help achieve and maintain a health enhancing level of physical activity and fitness. And it relates to the CTAE in the workforce, as it uses appropriate technology to collect, record, manipulate, analyze, and report data. What will students learn within this unit that is embedded into the connected math project? In the comparing and scaling unit, students will learn use informal language to ask comparison questions such as, what is the ratio of boys to girls in a class? They will choose an appropriate method to make comparisons among quantities using ratios, percents, fractions, rates, or differences. Find equivalent forms of given ratios and rates to scale comparisons up and down. Find and interpret unit rates and use them to make comparisons. Use unit rates to write an equation to represent a pattern in a table of data. Set up and solve proportions. And lastly, use proportional reasoning to solve problems. How is it structured? The comparing and scaling unit is divided into 4 investigations. Investigation 1, making comparisons. Investigation 2, comparing ratios, percents, and fractions. Investigation 3, comparing and scaling rates. Investigation 4, making sense of proportions. In investigation 1, students will explore rates and ratios and rates, analyze comparison statements, and write comparison statements. They will also receive a homework assignment. Investigation 1, common student errors. For example, if students are given a problem as shown on the screen, students at Nielsen Middle School are asked if they prefer watching television or listening to the radio. Of 150 students, 100 prefer television and 50 prefer radio. And then they are given questions A through D, and they have to answer the various scenarios. In answering these scenarios, students might show errors when setting up ratios using fractions, comparing and contrasting between the different scenarios, and not being fluent in fraction division. Investigation 2, comparing ratios, percents, and fractions. In this investigation, students will develop comparison strategies. They will dive deeper into comparison strategies, and then they will also scale ratios. A common student error for investigation 2, given the problem on the screen, the camp dining room has 2 kinds of tables. A large table seats 10 people, a small table seats 8 people. On pizza night, the students serving dinner put 4 pizzas on each large table and 3 pieces on each small table. The question is, suppose the pizzas are shared equally by everyone at the table. Does a person sitting at the small table get the same amount as a person sitting at a large table? A common student error students might have when completing this problem is setting up and solving equations to find equivalent rates. Investigation 3, comparing and scaling rates. In this investigation, students will make and use a rate table. They will find rates. They will dive deeper into unit rates and equations, so creating equations, and then also two different rates. Investigation 3, common student errors, as shown on the screen. Students are given a ratio table that has some numbers filled in and some not. And the appropriate thing to do in this situation is find all of the missing components. Now, when solving this ratio table, students might have problem with finding the unit rate given a table. Since the unit rate is not given to them, they are going to have to solve the unit rate for one of the scenarios in order to find the missing pieces. And then in part A, it says build a rate table. So therefore, they also might have problems with creating and or solving a unit rate table. Investigation 4, making sense of proportions. In this investigation, students are setting up and solving proportions. They are also doing applications of those proportions and then developing strategies or developing different strategies to solve said proportions. Investigation 4, common student errors. When students are given a proportion is an equation that states two equal ratios. Typically, when you have one ratio equal to another, one of those missing components within each ratio fraction is missing. And the object of these problems is for students to find that missing component. Now, common student errors might develop when setting up the proportions. For instance, if they are given a word problem and they have to first set up the proportion before solving. Solving proportions using the cross product property, meaning that students might not know that they have to multiply diagonally in order to get started, and then also solving those one-step equations. Once those students multiply diagonally, they're going to have to solve a one-step equation to get that variable by itself. And once the variable is by itself, that is their answer. An alternative assessment to this unit is a unit project. The unit project given per the textbook is the unit project is a mathematical investigation of a game called paper pool. For a pool table, use grid paper rectangles like the one shown at the right. Each outside corner is a pocket where a ball could fall. Now, there are two parts to this investigation, and then students have an extension question. So part 1 is investigate the two questions, and then part 2 is to write a report. And then the last part, in my opinion, might be optional depending on the type of students that you teach, but is an extension question to dive deeper into the project. And lastly, how does this unit that I have presented connect to the article analysis that I have previously written in this class? So the article that I dove deeper on for this class was the use of explicit instruction and double dosing to teach ratios, proportions, and percentages to at-risk middle school students. And that was written by Piper and Martella in 2010. This article consisted of two groups. We had an at-risk group and a peer group. The at-risk group consisted of 6 males and 2 females, all ages 14. And all of these students were identified to be at risk due to their test scores. The goal of this project was to have an at-risk group and then a non-at-risk group. And the curriculum that was used for the study was actually the same curriculum that I just presented to you. It was the Connected Math Project, which was a district-approved math curriculum that provides an inquiry-based learning. The unit studied for this project was actually the same unit that I just presented, the comparing and scaling unit, and it included the following: conversions of fractions, decimals, and percents, proportions from word problems, unit rates from word problems, comparison of ratios using inequalities and equal symbols, solving for missing numbers in proportions, and finding missing numbers in percent sentences, and lastly, calculation of tax and discounts. Now, even though this is the same unit, the information covered from this study to now has changed. Given that this study was done in 2010 and we are currently in 2024, the standards have changed over the years. However, the big ideas remain the same.